Good day, everyone. Welcome back to distance learning. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak, hopefully we'll get to see each other again soon. Today is day 9, March 30th, 2020, and today we're going to be going over the roles of women in the 20s, how things changed for them over these 10 years, and how many of you young ladies right now owe a lot of the rights that you have and a lot of the freedoms you have to these women. And we're going to go through that today. So the dynamic decade, far-reaching changes of lifestyles, values in the 20s. The census of the 20s shows for the first time most Americans are living in cities. We went over this beforehand. Most families lived on farms or in rural towns, country estates. This is the first year where there's a majority, more than half the people are living in cities. This is your New York City, Boston, Chicago, even Patterson. So the two graphs that we have here, the top one is population and immigration between 1920 and 1930. And the blue line is the US population and um, how much it grew each year. And the red line is immigration. And you can see both of them kind of correlate very closely with each other, with the exception of 1928, 29, and 30, where um, immigration increases. The next one is how much money people are making. And you can see between 1921 and 1929, there's a steady increase in the wages and how much money the US actually has and how rich of a country it is. We're going to get to that drop off at the end of the unit, because that's when the Great Depression starts in 1929. And that will be our next unit we're going to get into. So we will discuss that in the future. So the role of women changed. They worked in low-paying jobs originally. There's a birth control movement. Women want to take control of their bodies at this point. They want to take control of their lives, their bodies, other aspects that they feel that men shouldn't have control over. There's also a National Women's Party led by a woman by the name of Alice Paul. That is a photo of her there. Again, if you were in my class last year, we watched Iron Jawed Angel. Alice Paul was the main character of the thing we watched. And she pushed for equal right amendments. All right, so this chart here is actually kind of fascinating if you really look into what it's saying in this. So the red line is women who are entering the workforce, and the blue line is deaths of women, basically women that die given childbirth. And in 1900, there is the same amount of women in the workplace that are dying each year in childbirth, or out of every 100,000 babies who are born, 100 of them are dying. There's also 100 women working. You can see as more women go into the workforce, they actually start dying less. There's a few aspects to this. Women are having less children because they're working, so they're not staying home having kids constantly. But also there's more income coming in. They're living in cities. They have more access to medical technology, and medical technology is getting better. So therefore, less women are actually dying while giving childbirth, which allows um, women to actually survive longer and not have to worry about risk of death every time they have a child. So before 1920, around World War I and before that, most women, particularly white women, did not work outside the home. They performed traditional domestic responsibilities of conserving food and fuel resources in the early parts of the war. Their job was to raise the children, to cook, to clean. Basically, when you think of something sexist about a woman, that was their role back then. I want you to pay also special attention to the clothing they're wearing and how they actually look in this photograph. Because when we get into the 1920s, it's going to be completely different. Now, African American women worked a lot more than white women because the racism at the time period. An African American male was not getting paid as much as a white male. And same thing goes for African American women and white women. So where a white male could actually afford to take care of his wife and kids and own a house, it's very difficult for an African American male, mainly depending on where they lived. However, it was still very difficult to have enough of an income. So the women a lot of times would have to work. A lot of times as nannies or servants for the white families. So the 19th Amendment extends the right of suffrage to women. It's the right to vote. Now the 18th Amendment is prohibition. The 19th Amendment is the right to vote. Equal white, equal rights towards women and men. They should be treated the same. This is what they are fighting for. Making mothers joint guardians over children. Before this, if a man and a woman got a divorce, the husband or the man got control of the kids, and the mother had no rights to them. This way, the woman has the same amount of rights, and today, more than not, women will actually maintain control of a child in the event of a divorce, and also regain the age of protection of young girls to 18. You're not considered an adult till you're 18. And we kind of touched upon this earlier, where a lot of women were being forced to marry an older gentleman at the age of 14, at the age of 15. This they're saying now a woman is a child until she's 18, and then she's an adult, she can make her own decisions, but before then, they should not be forced to do adult or motherly things against their will. Now, this image here is them outside of the White House. Again, during the Iron Jawed Angels, we saw this recreated when they were arrested. But this is in front of Woodrow Wilson's White House. And the signs say, Mr. President, you say liberty is a fundamental demand of the human spirit. Mr. President, how long must women wait for our liberty? And I'm not really sure what the last one says because it's kind of cut off. But Wilson was saying that we are fighting the Germans in World War One because they're going against our liberty. We're fighting for freedom, and the women are saying we're fighting for our freedom, and you're denying it to us. So what makes you any different than the Germans? The rise of the flapper. In 1920, just 6 months after Prohibition becomes a law, women in America were given the right to vote. During World War One, millions of women had taken jobs over that were previously held by men, and this gave them a sense of independence. They know they were allowed to get out. They were allowed to enjoy themselves and do something worthwhile. And by doing this, it gave them a sense of they should have the same rights as the average man. And though it was suffragists who were on the front line of the right to vote, most historians, myself included, because believe it or not, I am a historian, agree that it was this freedom that sparked the flapper movement. For many people, these women became real heroines of the 1920s. So we're going to look into the flapper now, and flapper is not a derogatory name, even though it kind of sounds like one today. We're going to get where that name comes from, but it's a special type of woman who really blew up around this time period and really changed the lives of women that all throughout the 20s and after that, and even women today. So the flapper lifestyle. In the 1920s, a new woman was born. She smoked, she drank, she danced, she voted, she cut her hair, she wore makeup, and she was giddy and took risks. Now, if we look at this woman who is pictured here, her dress is a lot different, and her outfit is a lot different than the image that we saw previously that I told you to remember. You can even tell her personality. She looks a lot more happier, a lot more lively. She's enjoying herself. She is coming into her own at this time period. So the flapper dress were fashionable, independent young women of the 1920s. They rebelled against the way women were treated, hating the fact that men had the best jobs and earned more money. They also hated the quote unquote traditional role of women as wife and mother. Named because of the tendency to let their bootlaces flap around the ankles, flappers were easy to recognize. Before World War One, women wore long hair and tied under hats, a long dress covering their legs and arms, little makeup, and a tight corset around their waist. They, after they get their right to vote, and after they start feeling this independence during World War One, they start wanting more. They want equal. They don't want to be better than men. They don't want to change anything. They just want equal rights. A lot of them like being women, a lot of them like being mothers, but they also still wanted more. They wanted more from that life. And they're called flappers because they would leave their shoes untied. Like many of you would leave your shoes untied when you're walking down the hallways or walking around, and you flap around. That's where they get the name from. They didn't wear shoes like you did. They mainly wore boots, so they would be laced all the way up. So if you leave them flapping, um, kind of like work boots, where you think work boots are when they're untied. All right. Deliberate women wore short skirts, revealing tops, had short bobbed hairstyles, and wore lots of makeup. So the hairstyle, the bobbed hairstyle, is a short cut that is usually curled or permed that showed their neck, showed, didn't cover themselves up. They smoked cigarettes and drank alcohol in public. This was very unladylike in the years beforehand. The new energetic dances of the 20s, such as the Charleston, which I have some of you guys later on about, required women to be able to move freely, which corsets did not allow, and so many flappers stopped wearing them altogether. If you ever saw a movie from this time period or when it takes place, a lot of times women wear what looks like vest underneath their dresses, and they're very tight, and you would tie them to make them skinnier. It sucks in the waist, sucks in the body, and makes them that hourglass shape. A lot of women want to pass now or um, fainting from this time period because they weren't able to breathe with this thing on. Like imagine like having like ropes tied around your entire body, or like wearing a shirt that doesn't stretch, that is two sizes too small, and this is what they were wearing. And even some went, supposed to be went, not wet, some went to nightclubs without chaperones. At this time, if you go to a club, if you go somewhere, you're supposed to have a man with them to keep an eye on them so they don't get in trouble, and so no other guy hits on them or talks to them or tries to buy them a drink. They're saying, we don't need no man. We can do whatever we want. I don't need no man to back me up for this. So some changes in women's fashions from 1900 to 1929. So this is from 1900 to 1909. So the first decade, you can see how they are covered. They're wearing hats, you know, down to their wrist, they're completely covered, and down to the ankles, they're completely covered. Around 1910, there is not much of a change. Like up until 1919, okay, maybe you show a little bit ankle, maybe the dresses get a little bit shorter, but at the same time, the dresses aren't dragging on the floor, but they're still almost completely covered. But now, when we get to the next section of women in the 20s, you can see a complete difference. There is literally a complete difference between where we're at right now and where we're at beforehand. The dresses are shorter, they're showing off their arms, they're showing off their necks, they don't have this long hair covering themselves. So there's a lot of difference in fashion. So we're going to look at some images, just comparing the two things together. So again, these are some images of women from the early 1900s. Again, complete covered, dresses going to the floor, arms being covered, large hats. They're wearing this winter, summer, so it doesn't matter how hot it is, you're still wearing long sleeve, you know, shirts and skirts that went down the floor. And this other example is a shoe they would wear. They would have these very ornate high heel shoes, but covers up the entire foot, so you only see the ankle, but you're also still wearing dresses that cover all this up. So here is a comparison between 1910 to 1919 and 1920 and 1929. And you can just look up and down and just see the differences between them. Here's some women at the beach. Before this, women had to wear long bathing suits, almost that looked like dresses when they went out. This is the first time they're still wearing one piece. It's not a two-piece bathing suit invented yet, but they're able to wear um, bathing suits that were more revealing, that were more traditional, that they would want to wear and that they would felt more comfortable wearing. And in the beginning of this, there's actually people, cops, who were actually on the beach, who would actually have a rule and actually measure them to make sure the um, pants weren't too short on them. This is just an advertisement for some stockings they would wear. They wore stockings at this time. They weren't just wearing like heels with their legs out or their feet out. It was stockings that would go all the way up to the mid thigh. But you can tell from this woman who's there, kind of she doesn't look like the type of woman that you would have beforehand. This last image is of a flapper from the 1920s. It was actually a woman in costume from today, but this is the costumes that they would have. You could tell the makeup that she's wearing, the hairstyle, the type of dress, again, completely different than what was we saw beforehand. So I'm gonna let you guys take care of these last ones if you want. So this video here, you choose to watch it, just gives you an idea of what the dances look like. So this is films recorded during the 1920s that shows women dancing. I am going to give you the heads up. Some of it is considered risque. However, if you feel you're mature enough to view it, there is nothing bad in it, but you know the way these women are dancing sometimes might offend some people. So if you choose not to watch it, don't. And in case you want to learn it, if we ever go back to school and there's a school dance, or even next year when you have your prom, you want to learn how to do the Charleston. This young lady here will teach you the steps to the Charleston. All right, so here's what we're doing today. So for classwork, there is a um, unit up there, a section up there called 20s Women. It's a very short unit. It's only 3 pages long. And you're going to answer questions A through C. Um, please make sure that 7th grade quality responses, 1 to 2 sentences, and please ace the question. That is you're restating the question, you're answering it, you're citing the evidence. If you don't do all that, I cannot give you full credit. Homework is just questions 3 and 4. Again, you usually have 5 questions. This is a total of 5 questions broken into 2 things. It will count as 2 grades. Please make sure you submit it and you answer them fully. Again, if you do not answer in a complete sentence, I cannot give you full credit. Please answer in complete sentences so I give you full credit. It's what's expected at this point. Anyway, just feel free to replay this, pause this, whatever you may need to do, so you could review this in its entirety. I am going over this during the live lessons in the morning, and I will be available throughout the day for any questions or concerns you may have during this. Please have a great day, and if you have free time, practice that Charleston. Take care, everyone.